We commit to government notices. Acting leader. No resolution.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of a resolution to grant the sum of $2,226,311 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2021 to 2022 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 7, 2021-2022.
Revert to government business, sir. Order number 6, in the name of the... Huh? Huh? Oh, wait, tell me that, so. We committal of private members' notices.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to give notice of the following private members' resolution. Whereas on the occasion of the opening of the current session of this Parliament on the 8th of February 2022, this Honourable House was informed of government's programme for the session, and whereas that programme is designed to continue improving the economic, social and political life of the country, be it resolved that this House endorses the programme as presented and pledges to support the government in the effective implementation of it.
Revert to government business now, sir. Order number 6, sir. In the name of the acting leader of the House, to move that the House resolve itself into standing finance committee to consider the grant of sums of money for the service of this island.
Speaker, I beg to that this House do now resolve itself into standing finance committee. That you do now leave the chair, of course, and that the House resolve itself into standing finance committee.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into standing finance committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in standing finance committee.
In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $2,226,311 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2021 to 2022 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 7, 2021 to 2022, which form the schedule to the resolution. Head 13, Prime Minister's Office, in the amount of $1,984,050.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Chairman. You would recall, sir, that one of the very critical policy announcements that we made in the lead up to the last general election, sir, was that this government pledged to the country that we shall, in the course of executing this term, seek to develop a new geriatric hospital, sir, in what is to become on what has already started, but what will generally become our national botanical gardens at Waterford. And therefore, as consistent with our commitment, sir, to make sure that not just that we announce our intention, but we actually put resources at the disposal of the government to be able to execute and continue the work that we have started. And our commitment, sir, to transforming the country requires that we honor those commitments, notwithstanding the challenges that are facing the country. And so some of the money is being asked here, sir, under sub-program 332, and I just want to make it clear in terms of what is intended here, given that as it relates to this specific initiative, sir, the BTII, Barbados Tourism Investment Inc., sir, is being provided with the resources to be able to deal with the design aspect of this facility. And we are clear, sir, that the intent as it relates to where the existing geriatric hospital is at the moment on Beckles Road. The intention of the government is to transform that space, sir, in addition to what is happening with respect to government headquarters itself. I know that there will be need for further discussions with respect to areas between government headquarters and the geriatric hospital itself, which I know is ongoing. But the reality is, sir, is that if we are going to provide a much more scenic and idyllic environment for our elderly population to be able to spend out their golden years, we feel, sir, it is important that we get this work started, and that the BTII, which certainly I think, based on what Barbadians have seen certainly taking place within the confines of Bridgetown, that their records, sir, of executing with respect to these projects, I think the whole entire country can be proud of. And therefore, this specific intervention here is to allow them to be able to start the development works as it relates to the design of the new geriatric hospital, whilst we work, sir, to make sure then that we can deal with the other administrative matters here. And the reason this is important, sir, is, as you know, every year, as we approach hurricane season, there's always a constant concern with respect to if something happened, the site at Beckles Hill may become a bit exposed with respect to significant exposure to the elements, and the extent to which our ability to respond obviously may be compromised. But to be quite honest, sir, as we develop and look to vision the execution of the botanical gardens, it could be no more, there couldn't be a better place, sir, than to locate our elderly population than in a very serene and idyllic environment which is envisaged for that wonderful space at Waterford. We've all driven through there, sir, and seen the transformation that this government has already started. It used to be called Waterford Bottom. I'm hearing references to Waterford Boulevard these days, sir, in relation to, but seriously, I think the country has acknowledged the work that this government has already done to start to beautify and to transform this country. And we are committed, sir, to ensuring that we can resolve what is a long-standing issue, and to have our seniors, as they live out their golden years, sir, reside in a space that certainly for those who are able to be able to move around the botanical gardens as it's completed, and for our families to be able to visit their loved ones in an environment that they know obviously is befitting the contribution that our seniors made to the country. But all in all, sir, this is part of the entire redevelopment and transformation of Bridgetown, and certainly the greater and the entire country, but certainly as it relates to Bridgetown, as part of government's overall public sector investment program, and being able to ensure that we can drive not just social transformation, but more importantly, to ensure that the assets that we do have as we look across the landscape of government, that we can press our assets into greater production, for lack of a better term, sir, because we must ensure that we're appropriate, that our asset liability is always in balance, and it says so very clear that COVID has had a significant impact on the country over the last 2 years. And therefore, we must ensure that as we seek to execute, not just on the public investment side, but certainly bringing private sector projects to play, that we can yield the maximum return in the shortest possible time with respect to the assets that we have available to us. And I believe that this forms part of the transformation of that greater Bridgetown area. I know that in 2 years ago, we had embarked on a tourism transformation initiative with respect to a number of sites between Needham's Point and coming all the way down to the Pierhead. And then this really forms part of that specific intervention to make sure that we can open up the spaces for new types of investments. It is contemplated, sir, that within the context of being able to develop potentially a new conference center, at the specific site, to be able to make sure then that we can leverage the anticipated future development along that stretch of course with respect to being able to help build out the economy, utilizing in a number of instances, sir, planning gains to help improve the lives of the residents in that urban corridor, which this government has been committed to executing from day one. And therefore, Barbadians in and around the environment of a lot of these developments can not only look forward to seeing job opportunities arise, but certainly an improvement with respect to the physical surroundings is anticipated here. So the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc., sir, is being provided these resources, as I said, to start the design work. Yes, it is a facility that is managed by will be managed by the Ministry of Health and Wellness going forward. But as part of that overarching framework with respect to being able to do this, we felt it was important that, given that, yes, we are at what I hope, sir, is the tail end of the more extreme measures we've had to take in response to COVID. The Ministry of Health certainly has done a very wonderful job at keeping Barbadians as safe as it can, and therefore we are allowing them to refocus on restarting the normal provision of health services to the country, and allowing BTI to deal with the design side of the project at this stage, in order to make sure then that they can focus their attention on what really Barbadians can look forward to, which is the normal resumption of the provision of health services in the country. And so 1.452 million, sir, is being allocated with respect to these design works in relation to this matter. As it relates to the other element under PMO, you would be reminded, sir, that this Catapult or Future Barbados initiative, which is here, is part of the National Transformation Initiative, which is intended to unleash, if you like, sir, a lot of the energy of a lot of our young people in the country to help problem solve a number of areas within government as a mechanism through which we can utilize, yes, the experience of the existing public service, but really to help improve the delivery of and to solve some very critical problems, particularly on the technological side, to be able to make sure that that government in of itself is delivering to the public and in a very specific way, engaging the expertise of a number of young people to be able to do that. When we did this earlier in the financial year, we recognized that obviously we had to review at midterm to see where we would go, and we had initially agreed then that having done that review, that we will commit the remaining resources for the rest of this financial year. And so the monies that are here are intended to be able to resolve that. And as a number of Barbadians may have seen over the course of leading into October or November of last year, as we went into the transition to becoming a republic, they saw some of those young people who are participating in the Future Barbados exercise in conversation with the Prime Minister and others as to the path forward with respect to helping to solve some of these long-standing issues across government. And I believe, sir, that this is something that we will seek to continue to engage young people to help solve real problems that Barbadians have been experiencing for too long, and to build a culture within government, certainly, and government departments, that will focus more on not just the monitoring and evaluation exercises that we do, but actually to fix problems as they arise on a consistent and a periodic basis, to ensure that we are getting the greatest, not just efficiency, but certainly the best provision, sir, of services from the departments to the public of Barbados. And so this is a specific intervention, if you like, to allow, in a sense, the transformation exercise to continue, because, as you know, sir, the Barbadians still expect services to be delivered when they go to any department in government. But sometimes it is often difficult to respond to those specific requirements, whilst at the same time trying to change the systems at the same time. So I believe that as this specific program is rolled out and it works department, ministry by ministry, sir, that we will be able to see an acceleration, not just of the transformation, but certainly some type of change management, change of culture within some of the departments, not just as it relates to technology, but certainly as it relates to the empowerment and the upskilling, sir, for lack of a better term, of persons within departments to be able to respond swifter to the needs of the public. And so, sir, these two initiatives here really form part of the transformational agenda. It is early days for both interventions, but we certainly look forward to seeing the benefits of not just the investment as it relates to the continued housing of our elderly population, and the revamping, sir, of how we deal with the care of the elderly in the country. I know that the Honourable Minister of Health and the member for St. Philip North as well, that they'll be working to focus more on how we can get a transformation of the way that services are accessed in terms of public health services are accessed in the country. We are seeing more and more investment coming into the country with respect to medical services as we transition to not just focus on how we provide health care as a government to the local population, but partnering with investors to ensure that we can enhance the delivery of public health services across the board to all Barbadians, but partnering with the private sector to be able to leverage that long and very strong capacity that we have within public health, to leverage it, sir, as an economic advantage, to press it, to be able to bring actually to fruition what we've long spoken about in terms of medical tourism and these types of other avenues. We've already seen the change that the involvement with Ross University has had within the context of improving the skill sets, certainly of nurses and others across the board. And we are working as aggressively as we can, sir, to make sure that in spite of COVID, that we're able to solve those particular issues that have been long-standing. And I say this in all honesty, sir, to all Barbadians, that in spite of the last 2 years, this government continues to provide the necessary resources to transform. And we don't take it lightly, because at the end of the day, we know that the last 2 years have had a very significant impact on all of us in all our lives. But we are committed, sir, to ensuring that we can continue to provide the best quality services to the public of Barbados. But we have to transition now and make sure that we have the right mix of investment, such that as it relates to, in a broader sense, sir, in relation to health and wellness, that we're able to leverage the whole system, whether public or private, to be able to ensure then that persons are not left in long waiting time, with respect to being able to access services, whether in the public space or within the context of the private space. And therefore, as we transform, it means that there will be changes with respect to how some of the services may be delivered. But I say to Barbadians that this is all part of how we are able to better improve the delivery of our systems and services to the public. And therefore, these two interventions here today, I believe, form a critical part of that. And I look forward to a time when we can all visit what would be a completed geriatric hospital in Waterford, and seeing the companion investment taking place, as I spoke to earlier, with respect to the generation of economic activity, but also the improvement of the living conditions, certainly within the context of that urban corridor in Bridgetown, with respect to the residents there. And so with those very few words, sir, I beg to move that head 13 stand part.
The question is, head 13 stands part. Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't intend to delay the House. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I don't intend to delay the House too long, but I do feel it necessary to support this particular resolution. As the Honourable Member who introduced it has indicated, there are two specific components. One relates to Phase 1, Catapult Future Barbados, and the other relates to design work for the new geriatric hospital. In relation to the first aspect of the resolution, I've had the opportunity to work very closely with Future Barbados. Not only was part of the session that the Honourable Member spoke about with the young people of this island, who I consider to be some of the brightest minds and certainly the future of this country, but also to be able to share with them, when I was former Minister of Education, what opportunities may have existed for young Barbadians, educated in Barbados, but living abroad, in some cases, wanting to be able to give back to this island. And I want to spend a little time on that, sir, because I feel that there are other Barbadians, young Barbadians, who have been educated in this country, who have had opportunities abroad, but their heart and their soul is still very much in being able to help to build out and to shape this country. And this particular initiative has been designed to give a number of those young people who for many years have felt as though there was not a place for them, who have felt that, you know, the opportunities in terms of work and employment in this country were not opening up to create opportunities for them to be able to give back and to serve their country, sir. And I do feel that this is an initiative that all Barbadians should rally around. I believe there are only a small quota of young people who would have entered in this first phase, but already they have started to look at a number of projects across ministries. And I know that the now current Minister of Education will be able to continue the discussions that have been made with those young people to be able to help us to work with the public officers to help to build out and to transform education in this country. It was interesting, sir, as well, almost as though fate would have it, that I also had the opportunity to engage as Minister of Education with these young people in relation to the Ministry of Public Works. And Prime Minister had asked me at one point to meet with the team to be able to look at solutions for drainage in this country, looking at the possibility of designing apps that would basically, and technology that would be able to allow the drainage division to be able to identify where the wells were across the country. And again, as I said, as fate would have it, I guess I now have the opportunity, now that the ministry has landed on my lap, certainly, to be able to now be in a position to continue to build that out. So I wanted to say essentially that I support this initiative. I look forward to us being able to have many more young Barbadians being able to take up the opportunity to be a part of this initiative, to allow Barbadians to feel as though they can be part of not only the decision making, but also part of the problem solving in the country, and to tap into what I consider to be a number of young people who have gained experience in educational institutions outside, who have gained experience at the level of corporate entities outside of these shores, and want not only to be able to gain that experience, but want as well to make Barbados their home, or at least to be able to make Barbados that place where they can bring back what they have learned to these shores, to be able to help us as a government to build out the economy. So I want to highlight and certainly to endorse this initiative. Also, Mr. Speaker, in relation to the sums being allocated for the design work for the new geriatric hospital, to simply to say that perhaps more so in this pandemic, we have seen the impact on our elderly population. If you go to the hospital at any point, you will often see, and we used to talk about it before, but I can tell you that during the pandemic, the number of elderly people who are often in A&E or who are going down to the hospital, in many cases abandoned by their relatives, is still on the increase. And it is certainly for me, sir, one who was raised by my grandmother, it pains me to know that there are young people, elderly people, who are often left in those circumstances where, the family cannot cope for them, and the only place that they, in many cases, feel that they can seek solace is at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which, as you know, is obviously causing, severe strain on already difficult resources there. So I think the fact that we've seen this area, which is near to the National Botanical Gardens, actually starting to be cleared, that we've seen the transformation of that area by the government and by the Ministry of the Environment, I think it signals for the country that that particular area is going to be a fantastic site when the botanical gardens are complete, but also when this particular geriatric hospital is able to be placed in that particular location. And I hope that our elderly population, not just the ones who are at the present geriatric hospital, but that we are able to cater to several more of our elderly population at this particular institution. I think our elderly people deserve, who have worked very hard to build out this country, I think they deserve the opportunity to be placed in institutional care, which can redound to their benefit, and in many cases also ease the households in which they are living. It is no mystery, sir, that, we have a rising aging population. We also have a number of our elderly people affected by Alzheimer's, and more we are seeing elderly people, struggling, especially in their latter years, to be able to cope. Their families are also impacted because it is very difficult to have elderly persons with these conditions and then find yourself in a situation where you're not sure if you leave to go to work, if the elderly person is going to stray too far from home, or if they will injure themselves, sir. And I do feel that while as a government, we must continue to encourage facilities which can assist to take the burden off of households and families who are experiencing this. Government still has an equal responsibility to ensure that it builds out facilities to be able to cater to that catchment of our elderly population. And so I therefore want to endorse this initiative. I trust that the design work is likely to be completed very soon, and hopefully then we can see the construction of this site and indeed the transformation of the lives of several of our elderly population. So with those few words, Mr. Chair, I beg to support this resolution.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I too will not detain the House very long, but I could not, while rising to support the resolution before the House, fail to speak to a matter that is of concern from my perspective, given my ministerial portfolio, but also as a human being in relation to the elderly of our nation. And it has to do with the provision for their financial security as they age and as they attempt to enjoy their senior years. Now, I am fully in support of the provision of the new facility. I agree with the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central and the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Member for St. Michael South East, that the location is ideal for, as a matter of fact, let me put it a different way. I wouldn't mind aging close to a botanical garden and enjoying my senior years in, not at Waterford, but in a botanical garden. I didn't even want to call the address, so I just stick to the botanical garden. But I think it will be a wonderful location for those persons who have spent their lives building this country, raising us, and positioning us in a place where we now can move the country forward. Many of our older residents, however, have the challenge of not being financially secure in these elder years. And I speak specifically about situations where, when it comes to retirement age, persons realize or are reminded that they have not made the requisite contributions to the social security system that would allow them to be able to receive a pension at the point in time when they're no longer working and will need those funds in order to support themselves. And I want to use this intervention really to remind Barbadians that if we live long enough, we will become seniors. And if we live long enough and become seniors, we may not be able to go out to work or to engage in the entrepreneurial activity that we engage in now to earn a living to support ourselves. And so I am calling on Barbadians to contribute to the Social Security scheme. The National Insurance Scheme has been set up so that when we get to the point where we are not able to go out to engage in the activity, we no longer have the strength, and maybe we've put in enough time, that there is something that we can rely on to support us, to pay for those essentials that we will still need. I would also want to, and I will also, indicate to Barbadians that those who can ought to do even more than the contribution to the National Insurance Scheme. What I'm saying, Mr. Chair, is that those who can have other investments for retirement, whatever those investments are, retirement plans, investing in real estate, whatever a person is able to afford. I am encouraging Barbadians, even those of us who believe that we are young and never going to get old, to think about that time. The good book, the scripture, counsels us to go to the ant and be wise and to get some wisdom. And Solomon indicates what he's talking about. There are usually winters that will come. There are times ahead of us where we will not have what we have now, and we will have to draw on that which we have put aside. And I'm saying to all of us, to Barbadians generally, all of us in this chamber, and through you, Mr. Chairman, that we ought to be thinking about what is potentially ahead of us. as we get older, our need for medical attention may increase. I'm not saying will, may increase. And the need to look after a vehicle, to look after our house. Not earning an income does not stop the expenses. We will still need to have outflow to cover those necessary expenses. And we have, while we are working, to be planning for those eventualities. Because once we live long enough, those eventualities will materialize. Those events will materialize. I also want to commend, in that vein, the ministry responsible for business development and for starting the financial literacy. Because financial literacy is absolutely critical. We complain from time to time that we go through school and we are not taught how to manage our money. You know, we are taught mathematics. In some cases, we are taught accounts, but we're not really given guidance as to how to manage our own finances, how to manage our finances now, and how to plan for the future. The financial literacy program is essential not just for persons who intend to become entrepreneurs. It is crafted for business people, but I want to suggest to all of us that financial literacy is a skill, an ability, it is a body of knowledge that is necessary for all Barbadians, whether or not we are going to be involved in business activity, in entrepreneurial activity. And so, Mr. Chair, I want to suggest to us that the sharing of knowledge in the area of money management is something that has to be extended across the board to all Barbadians. We need to understand how to manage our resources now, and we need to plan for those retirement years when we can enjoy the facility that the funds we will vote on shortly will be used to construct. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that call for financial awareness, and with that call for our people, all of us, to contribute to the social security system, I want to lend my full support to the resolution before the House. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add my happiness to the efforts by this government to place funding at the disposal of looking forward to better quality care for our senior citizens in this country. It is a matter that has been long overdue, and I'm really very happy to have seen from what took place over the last 3 years, government's effort to attach to the Ministry of People Empowerment that elder care component. I know of a previous administration of the Barbados Labour Party that sought to look after the needs of senior citizens across the length and breadth of Barbados through the National Assistance Board and upgrading housing and so for them. But that is a different time because we're talking now in the very early 1980s. And it is sad to know that our society has changed so tremendously that our seniors are really getting the worst deal ever, most of them as a result of changes in the way we do things. I know that in the past, a district hospital was called the Arms House. And that is where people who were extremely impoverished, who needed assistance, had to resort. And therefore, there was this scourge about it where people thought, oh, to go to the Arms House, you're nobody, or you're poorest of the poor. But I have found that over the years, the whole concept of the district hospital has changed. And the people are now coming day after day. And I know the Honourable Minister now in that Ministry of People Empowerment is going to be saddled with so many requests for seniors to be housed in district hospitals. And I think that this idea of placing the new district hospital in that general area of the botanical gardens is a bostro. Bostro meaning that the ambience of those environs and the newness that will take place and the kind of quality care that will continue to be offered, as is the case in our governmental district hospitals and indeed some of our nursing homes across the country, that is going to make a tremendous difference in extending the lives of our seniors. Now, I indicated just now every day people are making requests, and we can understand that because our extended family played a very significant role in keeping our seniors at home. Because we've changed the whole outlook now, and we're having a different kind of family structure where children now move away from home. That extended family with the uncle and the auntie and the great-grandmother and so on, we see very little of that in our society. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but I would prefer for children and grandchildren to move back home or to stay at home with the seniors. Too many of them are suffering. And I'm talking, having had the exposure, I'm talking, sir, of more than 15 requests per day for seniors to be placed in the district hospitals. Our seniors and our population of that time, they had strategies that they used. My grandparents and their parents became very ill or aged and could not come out. If they had a stroke, they had their own remedies at home and they worked with them at home. Our younger folk don't know what to do now. You had the mustard roll and all the different things you could put on them and the nutmeg and so. And a lot of my honorable members in here will not know what is mustard roll. But I can tell them about it. And the pap and the pigeon soup and the different things that you gave those old people, massaging the limbs and giving them a hopping ball that they can do it to flex the muscles if they had a stroke, and taking a whole nutmeg out of the shell, putting it in their mouths so that they can use it and it helped to bring back the speech whenever they had a stroke. I've had that experience because my grandmother did it. She was like that, and my mother worked on her tirelessly. And that is where my passion really came as to how people in the general villages and communities across Barbados looked after their aged. And of course, you know, sir, as a result of the quality education that has been offered, as well as the quality care, persons now going to polyclinics to be able to get the treatment, many of them have been living longer. I saw in the newspaper not long ago a senior citizen, a centenarian, 106 years old. And we have centenarians almost every month. And therefore, as they get older, living alone is becoming a very lonely experience for many of them if there are no support systems. And I want to thank people in communities who have given their services to those seniors, their godfathers, their godmothers, particularly those who are living alone. They really require that kind of assistance. And so the National Assistance Board has been playing its part. The Honourable Minister will most likely speak, and I know he will speak passionately because he too experiences it as he goes through his constituency. And I know that the calls that were coming at me, they have reduced because I believe he's getting them now. It is not an easy experience. Every day and night, persons are asking. We talk about Barbados being the capital for amputations of the world. I think that's the expression. And yes, we know that diabetes is taking hold of many of our lives because of the changing in our eating and exercise habits. But that too causes families to call. And you will appreciate, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Chairman, sir, that if you leave, you have a mother, a father, a grandfather living with you, you have to be the major breadwinner. Then you cannot treat to all of their needs. And to compound it all now, when I was a little girl many moons ago, we would talk about persons and they hear people say, oh, the old man down the road, Mr. So-and-so, he turning dotish. Or the old lady so turning bewitched. They did not understand. That was Alzheimer's and dementias that were coming in. But they did not have that kind of investigation done or worldwide for them to be able to become familiar. But Alzheimer's is with us. And a lot of young people are now captured in that Alzheimer's or that dementia experience, and therefore we need more community care and family care, led by the families, I should say, to be able to look after the care of those elderlies. I know that senior citizens now, who were young then, working in the agricultural belt, in the various industries and so, they always put aside something for their burial. They will put aside a $5, a $10, and nobody could touch it, whether they put it in a credit union or in the bank, or they tied it up and hid it in the rock hole, or they buried it in the ground in a tin. They had all of those plans. And nowadays, we are seeing a total change in what's happening in our society, where those old people would have had that money put down to buy the coffin, or we call it the box, but the coffin, for their burial, because they wanted to have that dignity of leaving this world. And unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, too many of the relatives and some friends in the communities and some other distinguished in the eyes of themselves, but not me, on a lot of persons in Barbados and in different professions who have to work with those senior citizens, are not treating them well. They are being robbed blind day and night of their properties, whether it be money in the bank or money in the house or jewelry or the properties in which they are living. And I believe that this institution will help to take off some of the challenges and secure those, or make sure that those seniors are safer in the environs. It really is a matter for concern. I know that PAHO has been doing a consultancy, and they have given back reports as to the way forward, working towards more legislation to be able for us to protect the elderly, to have them in safer environments, as well as to stop them from being robbed. The new thing in Barbados, and I heard those of another administration in the past talk about it, the new thing is that as soon as your relatives fall ill, carry them to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and leave them in the casualty. And then by the time they get the attention and they have to be hospitalized and they become a little better, they're being told by friends and other professionals who should know better, don't go back, let the hospital keep them. So unfortunately, every year, the numbers at the QEH of persons who are senior citizens who can live back in the communities and in their own homes or with families, the numbers are growing. Sometimes it's more than 200. And therefore, the quality beds that they're that they're using can be used for other critical care of other patients who should be in the hospital. So the government, over the years, has been looking at the alternative care program to be able to work closer with private nursing homes so that those persons can be transitioned from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, occupying those quality care beds, to go to those various homes. And I'm going to come down to the closure, sir, because the services in Barbados are overwhelmed, especially in our district hospitals. And that is as a result of families not taking care of their own. And as I was saying earlier, because we know that other members of the family who are the major breadwinners cannot do more, because to have a relative or a dear friend whom you're looking after to be down with Alzheimer's or dementia, it calls for time, patience, quality care. And if that is not happening, and those persons have to stay at home while the family has to go out to work, the food you leave in the flask, if you miss and turn it too tight, they can't have anything to eat at lunchtime when they're hungry. Some of them don't even know what is in the flask or how to open it because there's no one there to support them. And so I laud this government for these efforts to be able to look after the needs of our seniors, who are the bedrock of our society, by not only building or setting out the plans to have this facility constructed in the botanical gardens, but also to look at the Elder Care Companion Project. That too is causing persons who live in the communities to be able to go into homes with the people they know. So I'm living in Wetchmore Hall and I know everybody in the community. But if I were living and unemployed, but I had some skills, it's my godmother, my great aunt, my neighbor, my friend, my church member, I would want to be engaged to go to visit at least 3 or 4 of them per week and work with them. You're not asking them to bathe them, brush their teeth, comb their hair. But if the person wants that, if it's my godmother, I will gladly bathe my godmother or my godfather for that matter. But those are persons in the village who know them, and that is the reason why you call it companion, because it is not taken away from the National Assistance Board's responsibilities, where they bathe and they clean and do a little cooking and so on. But these young people do a little ministering. They listen to the history of Barbados, and you could not get it better from the senior citizens who would have lived through the riots and who would have seen how the changes in society are taking place and causing them to be able to be pushed away because they're not quite understanding things to do with the technology and how to turn on the radio, all that. So that companion project is helping many of our senior citizens to remain comfortable, especially at this time of COVID, when they're shut away, they can't go to church as they would like. Family members are not allowed to visit them in the same way because of how the COVID-19 pandemic is spreading. And we are hearing of so many hundreds of our seniors that are passing away. And so I say, I want for the legislation to happen. The Honourable Minister now in the ministry, he is continuing to do the excellent work, and I believe that he will be able to bring to this Honourable Chamber those efforts that we know have started to be able to make sure that the legislative situations are put in place, measures are put in place to avoid those old people being duped, to avoid them being raped, to avoid them being beaten, to avoid them being ill-treated where they have no food to eat, no clothes to wear, nothing, because some of their same children and friends who are embracing them and others are taking away the entire pension. They're getting it changed or cashed, and they're using it for their own purposes while those senior citizens are left hungry and tired. And I want to thank the government for this vision of ensuring that our seniors are well cared for, because my mother and my parents and people of her generation always said, once a man, twice a child. And those of us who will live longer, I'm in that category, Mr. Chairman, sir. Those of us who will live longer will get to understand. We're not going to remember everything. We're not going to remember every features, especially, people are wearing masks. You can't tell who is who. However, there are people who will befriend the senior citizens and then take a toll in whatever they have and cause them to suffer in a way that is beyond human call. So I embrace these efforts, and I encourage all Barbadians, whether it's your relative or not, it's your neighbor, it's your friend from the church, it's the person who mentored you when you were a child, give them a little visit when you can. Make sure that they get a meal. Ensure that if they're ill, somebody is there to cushion them and to take them to the doctor or have the visits done, but to stamp out the negatives that are happening. And I'm confident that this new district hospital in that wonderful location in the Botanical Gardens will help to extend the life of those persons who will perhaps in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, I don't know what time frame it will be, but it will take some of the load of the regular district hospitals in the communities across the country. And I pray that when we get to the estimates, I can see even more being put into it, so that there are regular district hospitals. You've got one in St. Lucie, sir. I've got one at Gordon Cummins. And in St. Thomas, there's one in St. Philip. And then there's the one in Beckles Road that will be replaced by this one. I believe that once we get those on the periphery of the Botanical Gardens, it will help to make a difference in the lives of our seniors. None of us knows what the future will hold. And therefore, if persons are coming down with dementia as early as 40 and 45 and 50 years, then we never know what it will hold for us. But I encourage all of persons in the communities, work with them, embrace the seniors, give them an extra lease on life so that in their twilight years, they can enjoy what is left of it, knowing full well that they would have given their life, their blood, their sweat, their tears to be able to have this stable society that we have earned and that we must continue to work with in order to make sure that when we get old, systems are in place, or older, systems are in place that we too can enjoy the final years of our lives, knowing that nobody will come in to rape or rob or beat us or do anything negative. But at the end of the day, human rights are important, and each person deserves to get that privilege to be able to live long and to enjoy life. And so I lend my support in the most humble way, but of course, given everything else that I know would be able to see how this project can come to fruition, to be able to ease the tension and to give a hope to Barbadians. All is not well with our senior citizens, and we can play our part to make a difference in their lives, because today is the Senior Citizens Day. Tomorrow may be mine, or any of us in here, or anybody else within the world. And therefore, we need to do the best to make sure that we hold our communities together and care for our seniors in a way that as they move on to the great beyond, at least they have the comfort and all the pleasantries that they deserve, having been the nation builders of this country. And so, Mr. Chairman, I highly commend these funds, and I wish to support it for every effort that is being made, and I know that we will do more as time goes by, but this is the time when we need to thank all those home health workers, all those people in the communities, the faith-based organizations, and all other institutions that work together to be able to bring an element of hope, joy, contentment, and peace to the lives of our seniors across and the length and breadth of this country. I wish to thank you sincerely, sir, for the moment.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you. Thank you kindly, sir, for allowing me to say a few words this afternoon, on this very important topic, naturally support that which is before this House. I want to speak both, sir, as a Member of Parliament and as the Minister now responsible for the elderly. The geriatric hospital is currently located in St. Michael South, just above Beckles Hill, just behind the Prime Minister's current office. And of course, in moving, the Honourable Minister and the Ministry of Finance would have spoken to the persons who may reside between the Prime Minister's office and the geriatric hospital, which happen to be the residents of Beckles Hill, who happen to be my constituents, and for whom this subject has been one of some conversation. And I've had the privilege, sir, of taking there the former minister responsible for housing, the former member for St. Andrew. I've also taken there the former minister responsible for housing, the member for Christchurch West. And I promised to also take there the member for St. George South, who is now responsible for housing, as we address this issue, sir, in making sure that as we move, because it must move, the geriatric hospital must move. As we make the move, sir, that we take care of the residents who live there. Of course, in this matter, I am first and foremost a Member of Parliament. And I have been given assurances by all, the Prime Minister, the Ministers of Housing, and I believe it to be true. And in the conversations and consultations that I've already started, that the persons that may be affected by the move would be accommodated in ways that they find to be fair. But sir, in relation to the matter, before we move off, this is the first time I've actually spoken since we came back to this place, and I want to thank them, the residents in Beckles Hill, and all of us in Michael South for again giving me the opportunity to serve in this very honorable place, sir. In relation to this matter, and very quickly, as it relates to the elderly, I want to begin by thanking the former minister, the member for St. Thomas, for the amazing work that she did while serving as minister. And this entire House really would have to commend her for the outstanding work and leadership of the Ministry of People Empowerment. So I want to begin by thanking you. It is now sitting as minister and realizing that such a wonderful foundation has been laid, and recognizing the magnitude of the task before myself and the member for the city as we try to continue and to lead in this very important area. I want to also say, you know, as a person responsible for the elderly, this is a topic that I find very comfortable. It is one that I wrote my master's dissertation on, and an area that I feel very passionate about as well. I know the Deputy Prime Minister feels passionately about it. I know the relationship held with Grandma. And for many of us in this place, sir, who now have parents who are getting older, grandparents, constituents, sir, it is a matter close to the heart. And, you know, the elderly have contributed to society, whether paid or unpaid. And people are often asking, what you're doing it for. I mean, they've lived and they've contributed to Barbados, paid and unpaid, and deserve no real conversation about whether we should do things for them or not. Our population, sir, is living longer. And it is a good thing because people want to be able to live. But we must not find ourselves where we reduce mortality and increase morbidity. We must not ask people to live longer, encourage them to live longer, sir, and not put in place the things that would allow them to live well even as they live longer. And that is why building a new geriatric hospital with modern amenities in an area as lovely as the Botanical Gardens would obviously find favor with any right-thinking Barbadian. You know, in many countries in the Caribbean, and regrettably, and in Barbados, oftentimes elderly means disability. When you get to a particular age, it means welfare. It interacts with all the agencies under my ministry. Because of all the comorbidities, the NCDs that sometimes result in other issues, sir, it is going to be very important that we treat this issue very holistically. And for that reason, there are a number of things that I feel, I won't get into all of them now, but there are a number of things that I feel need to be put on the table. One thing of which I'm proud as well, not only is this new hospital, but we have made a commitment to expand the alternative care program for the elderly. That would allow us to put elderly persons in different district, community-based, I think, more suitably, services that would allow them to stay there and be serviced well and treated well, sir, so that they don't have to go to the hospital in much the way that the member for St. Thomas spoke, so that they're not, because the truth is that people oftentimes take their elderly to the hospital, they don't have the capacity to care, and they leave them there. And that there are a number of beds in the QEH now that are occupied by persons whose only issue is that they're old, and that they're not sick, and that they could function perhaps outside of a hospital. And we have to be able to do that. I also feel as well that we have to ensure that families help a little bit more. It would be unwise for me, I think, to come to this place and say that government will do everything, because families also have a responsibility to care for the elderly. And I also want to encourage, where you can, to do better. And I also must also, as a member for St. Peter did, speak to planning for retirement and as you get older, sir. These are comprehensive conversations that I feel we need to have, and that they shouldn't start when people get old. These are conversations we now need to have in school, so that people start understanding the need to plan for retirement early. When we start looking at education, we have to rethink the whole education so that people have practical tools as they go forward, sir, in Barbados. But there are a few programs that I feel we also need to bring to the ministry, that I also feel we need to bring to help persons who are getting old. Some that we've discussed already is, given COVID and the effect that COVID has predominantly on the older population, to ensure that the elderly can still stay connected, and we're looking at them being able to connect to one another through use of the internet. We also have to make sure that persons that have access to be able to go and get their medication. I know of cases where people are unable to get their medication, sir. So I'm thinking of a community-based program that allows the people in the community, young people, to be able to go and get the medication for the disabled, for the elderly, so that they don't have to expose themselves to COVID as well. Just practical tools. And then there is one that I call Mend a Mentor. The Honourable Member for the City knows how I feel about it, whereby we have to be able to mend the relationship between the young and the old, so there's some intergenerational exchange. We also have to be able to mend their houses, so do basic things to just beautify around the house so that they feel good about themselves even as they age. And these are some things that I hope to be able to bring. Not all we've discussed fully, but I know they're important programs as we go forward. But Lady Member for St. Thomas, there are also some things that trouble me. And I know, for example, that we still have cases where elderly people have to cash their checks. And they do so sometimes at the local shops. They do so by the visiting, I can't remember the proper term for it, the visiting salesmen, the itinerant vendors, I think. And they charge them ridiculous fees to cash their checks. So that, recognizing that the elderly people are unable to go and get the check cashed, or that they're offering a convenience to the elderly, they charge rates that in themselves are abuse. And I will not be silent about it, because it is unfairing old people in this country, and it has to stop, sir. And it troubles me. And that we have to be vigilant as MPs in looking after the welfare of our elderly population and making sure that these things do not happen. I'm not saying that you shouldn't charge us a little something, because you got to pay for it. There's an admin cost. You want to charge, but you can't kill them. And in good conscience, you really shouldn't charge them at all. because I began by saying that the elderly have contributed significantly to this country, and it has to stop. The other thing that I've seen, sir, that troubles me as an MP and across the country is that sometimes as people get old, especially if they have no one, people just move into the people's house. They move in, assert themselves either as family when they're often not, or as some caretaker when they're often not, and take over the house. And then use that position in the house to cause the elderly people grief in this country. That too has concerned me, sir. That too has to stop. And we've seen it time and time again, the abuse that is just being meted out to old people because they're old. And we have to be very, very careful about it, sir, as we go forward. From time to time, you may find pictures in the Nation or the Advocate, different newspaper on social media, sir, of elderly people whose conditions have, are less than what we would consider to be proper. I like when these things are highlighted, sir, because it gives us an opportunity to deal with them. But there are often times, sir, you have to look at the whole story and the whole picture. And the government agencies oftentimes respond to be able to address these. However, even the government has to respond quicker. We have to find a way to prioritize, sir, the elderly. The truth is, just on the basis of time alone, because only God knows how much time we have here, but on the basis of time alone, people who are 70 and 80 don't have as much time on the basis of time alone as somebody who's 17 and 18, and that we don't have the luxury of making them wait. And we have to prioritize. The Minister of Environment is very passionate about this particular area as well when it comes to persons who are above a certain age. So he's there rooting for me, sir. But we have to look after our elderly population. As they get older, sir, and all of us in this room, sir, we know it because we've been dealing with it. We've been dealing with it because we're MPs and because we're humans. But that we have to be very careful, sir, as we go forward in relation to how we treat the elderly people, sir. And that is why I think as we move toward a family services department, where we integrate our capacity to be able to serve, where we look at this thing holistically, where we look at NDU, we look at welfare and all these services that we can bring to bear to improve the lives and the conditions of persons who are elderly. The family services department will make a big difference as we go forward, sir, in terms of reducing the duplication, but also improving access to services. As I close, sir, there are a few things that I feel I want to share. I support self-help organizations. I always have. I support BARP. I see BARP has now dropped the age to 40, and therefore I can join BARP. It's a little young for Old People Association. I was hoping to join it at 50. But they've now dropped it to 40. I suppose that is to increase membership. But I support self-help organizations. My caution is that in dropping to 40, I hope that we do not lose focus on the core reason as to why BARP existed in the first place, which was to help those who were elderly and above a certain age. And while I support BARP, and I will continue to support BARP, there must be self-help organizations, sir, that help our people, so that elderly people, so that they can help solve their own issues. I believe, sir, that many people, as I do about the poor, understand their circumstances and are best placed to be able to offer solutions to the challenges that they face. So I support BARP, but BARP must serve all. It must serve middle-class Barbadians, and it must serve lower-class Barbadians. It must serve middle-class old people, and it must serve lower-class old people. It has to be that people who live in Britain's Hill and in the Baylands, sir, feel as strongly about a self-help organization for the old as people who live in other areas. And I hope to see BARP expand, sir. It's a conversation I hope to have them in for very soon. And tell me how I can help BARP to be able to better help the elderly population in BARP. BARP or a self-help organization. It doesn't have necessarily to be BARP, but I hope it's BARP. As we move forward to help persons, that's the Barbados Association of Retired Persons. This, sir, is another issue that I don't know how we're going to tackle, but recently when I was in the supermarket, Because since I've assumed this portfolio, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas is right. Like, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. I went to the supermarket, it's the same thing. I used to think that I was offering myself without any kind of like inhibitions as minister responsible for fisheries. But I've seen now as minister responsible for welfare, people's empowerment, and so on, this is a different kind of intensity. But I was in the supermarket, and one of the persons who worked there stopped me, and they told me that their mother, who is now 65, was forced to retire at 65. The pension age in Barbados, the age for which you can get pension, is 67. So people are forced, the Honourable Member for St. Peter is well aware, people are being made to go home at 65. I don't know if you can force somebody to go home at 65. So I said to her, I don't think you can be forced to go home at 65, but in Barbados, people are still making people go home at 65. And they're not entitled to pension until 67. So there is a 2-year gap where people who are legitimately entitled either to work or to a pension or to some financing are unable to do so. And we have to be very careful. We have to let them know it is wrong, 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 because people at that age should not be taken advantage of. She stopped me again when I went back to the supermarket. I hope she's late. She's just the young lady who works in Massey and Warrens. I'm saying this so the next time she sees me, she understands I took it seriously. And she said to me, I haven't heard you raise it. I see you talk about all kinds of things in the paper. But that 2-year gap, Mr. Chairman, sir, needs to be looked at, because as the Honourable Member St. Thomas said, is that they find themselves at welfare, having worked and earned and served in this country, because there's a 2-year period that there is a gap, and nature, sir, abhors the vacuum, and so do I, as it relates to the way elderly people are treated in this country, sir. The other thing that I think is also important, sir, because of this functional inequality, this as you get older, a functional inequality caused by aging is wrong, you know. You shouldn't become less able to access certain financing and resources because you're old. That's a functional inequality, and it's wrong. We have to be able to address it. But the other thing, sir, before I close, sir, there were 2 last things. There's this thing called a dependency ratio. And the dependency ratio is the working population, the percentage of those who are working to the percentage of those who are not working. So 0 to 14 and 65 and over are normally dependent on the people who work in between. And once the dependency ratio gets too high, it means that you have too many people who are not working being supported by too few people who are working. As our population ages and as our working population dwindles and the dependency ratio consequently increases, there is going to be a challenge facing older people in this country. We therefore need to make sure, when you hear the Honourable Prime Minister speaking of it, or the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, about the need to have people working in Barbados, it is not only because we want people to pay taxes, it's because we have people who have to make sure that we can support those who are also not working. And we must also offer respite care to persons as well who are not working. So these are just a few thoughts, Mr. Chair, sir, as I close. I wasn't planning on being this extensive, but these are just a few thoughts on the elderly and on this particular resolution before the House. I support it. I believe that moving the geriatric hospital is a good thing. We've seen it. We know that it is in the red zone for climate disasters. We know that it needs to be moved. We know that it is a good step to looking after our elderly, and there is going to be much said as we go forward. I must also say that I also hope to have the Honourable Member for St. Thomas continue to serve in the ministry to be able to help advise me on issues pertaining to the elderly. Not because of any age, but because of her competence and passion. So, Mr. Chairman, sir, with those few words, I want to thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And let me thank honourable members for the contributions they have made to this debate. I certainly welcome it. I too want to congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Thomas for her sterling leadership in the past administration. I know that in helping us to move this agenda forward, in her contribution she mentioned muster roll, but I suspect she will be able to inform the new leadership of the ministry of its usage, along with camphor and snuff and all the other wonderful remedies that used to take place within our communities. And it is really not a laughing matter. It is part of the health and wellness initiatives that we will want to reintroduce as we move forward, sir. But seriously, sir, this is a very important program. The Honourable Member for St. Peter raised issues in relation to retirement planning, which continues to be, and the Honourable Member for St. Thomas also raised it in the way that persons have to rely on family members when they're most vulnerable, and oftentimes, well, family members are other persons of goodwill, and regrettably, from time to time, there are persons that are whose motives are not of like mine. Now, one of the things, and we'll say to the chamber just very briefly, and regrettably, we didn't have enough time during the last sitting to address it, but I do know that the Ministry of Finance is now currently working on a specific policy to be able to deal with aspects of reverse mortgages, which will help persons moving forward to be able to access equity within their homes for better financing, which will serve as part of the retirement planning, if you like. But of course, that will mean, sir, that a lot of education will have to be undertaken with respect to the family as to how this will be done. Of course, it would require legislation to be able to execute, consultation certainly with the entire financial sector for these matters, because it is part of how a country develops, and to the extent that our population is aging, access to options for financing your lifestyle is going to be even more important. I know in the context of what we are working to do with respect to addressing the demographic shape of the population is going to be equally critical moving forward. But I give the House the assurance that we will seek to conclude that matter as quickly as possible in order to ensure then that elderly persons in this country will have additional options available to them to see them through their retirement years. And so, Mr. Chair, with those very few words, I mean, to thank honourable members again, I beg to move then that Head 13 stand part.
The question is that Head 13 stands part. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those members against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 83, Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, in the amount of $242,261.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this supplementary for $242,261 in support of the ministry's work in dealing with African swine fever. I believe the document before says swine flu. It's really swine fever. And I wish for the correction to be made because they're two different diseases. Chair, before I explain, I just crave your indulgence in allowing me to thank the good people of St. Philip South for reposing their trust and confidence in me to bring me back to this place to represent their interests. African swine fever was detected in July of 2021 in Dominican Republic. And since then, it has started to spread. I believe 98% of the areas that have herds are impacted by it, and therefore it is beginning to spread to the point where it has now reached Haiti. The challenge for us is that if we don't put plans in place early enough, we can find ourselves in a position where the entire herd in Barbados is wiped out. Because once the disease is present, then it's very difficult to control. And therefore, you may recall, Chair, that we started the process when you were with me in dealing with the African swine fever. We've done a number of PSAs informing the public. We've also been doing a mapping of all the pig farms in Barbados so that we can be aware of the amount of animals we have here and where they're located. And this is particularly important, Mr. Chairman, because this African swine fever, whilst it may not affect human beings, even if they consume meat that was infected by African swine fever, it would certainly destroy every last animal once the animal is infected. What is even worse is that an infected animal can carry the disease for a very long time, even if that animal survives. We therefore have to urge Barbadians to make sure that they don't bring pork meats into Barbados or pork products into Barbados without properly declaring them. Because if you were to do so, you may very well put Barbados at risk of having the disease brought into the country. And we do know how Barbadians treat pigs, particularly those who are doing what is called backyard farming, where they feed them ends of food and all different types of things. And you wouldn't want a situation where meat has been brought into Barbados, pork has been brought into Barbados that came from an area that has the African swine fever, and then we've exposed ourselves. The disease is right across the African continent. It was detected in Germany and in Brussels as well. Brussels has been able to control theirs to the extent that they had their restrictions removed and they can export again. That's not the same case in Germany. It has only reached Hispaniola, so we are still pretty good. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't plan. And therefore, this supplementary is for us to be able to purchase the equipment, similar to what we did when we were battling with COVID-19, SARS-CoV-19. We have to make sure we have PCR testing equipment, rapid antigen as well. And these sums of money are designed for us to be able to purchase that equipment. We have to put a special task force in place as well, so that we can do the mapping of the farms in Barbados. And then, of course, we would need additional human resources, veterinary skills, in order that we have enough veterinary officers at our disposal in the ministry as well. So we do recognize the importance of preparing Barbados. We have to be in a state of readiness. I just don't want the message to be blurred where the impression is conveyed that is in the Caribbean, because it is not. But it is in Hispaniola, which is not far away. And therefore, we have to prepare ourselves. We have to be ready. We can't wait till it's detected in the Caribbean in order for us to start the readiness. And so, Mr. Chairman, I can go into further details about it, but I don't want to delay the House. I'm cognizant of the time. But just to say to all Barbadians again, when you're completing your ED card, please give inaccurate information stating whether or not you were on a farm. And of course, I beg you, please, do not bring pork products into Barbados without first acquiring a license so to do. And so, Mr. Chairman, with those few words, I'm obliged to you and beg that this supplementary be passed. Head 83. Stand part.
The question is that head 83 stands part. Those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in committee, in Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that I do not report to the Speaker the passing of a resolution in Standing Finance Committee. Those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committee is reporting passing of one money resolution in committee. Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a first time.
Question is that the resolution be read a first time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
The question is that the resolution be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the resolution now be agreed to.
The question is that the resolution be now agreed to. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the Honourable Senior Minister, Transport Works and Water Resources, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2022.
Unrelated government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the second reading of the road traffic bill. Continue.
Hold a second.
Second? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the outset, Mr. Speaker, let me, first of all, wish all honourable students across this country and teachers a safe and productive return to school. And also a productive term. I know that it has been difficult for everyone in this current environment, and I am truly thankful that we have been able to return students safely and teachers to the classroom environment. I am confident that if we continue to work together as various stakeholders across the country, that we can settle these students and teachers into the environment and certainly put aside a number of the self-interests and the hidden agendas that sometimes rise to the fore in frustrating the efforts of the ministry to be able to do what it has to do. Now, I have all confidence in the current Minister of Education and member for St. Philip West in carrying on the work that has already been started, and I know from speaking to her just this morning that already our students have settled nicely into school. From my own ministry, having spoken to the CEO of the Transport Board There's an advantage of being the former Minister of Education, because I believe that you never stop being very closely connected to the ministry. But in this capacity, I now have the opportunity to work very closely with her to ensure that in particular transportation in this country is provided in an adequate and efficient manner for the children as they traverse to and from their homes to school. And so I know that the CEO is already on the ground. He is in particular meeting with a number of the rural schools to get the feedback from the teachers, the principals, as to how this morning has gone. And I suspect if there are any issues to be fine-tuned, it is not a perfect situation. And I always like to remind the public of that, that we are trying our best across government to make sure that there is this smooth return and safe return to school. But as you can appreciate, there will always be teething issues, but we remain committed to ensuring that our students return to the classroom and our teachers. As I turn my attention, however, Mr. Speaker, to the Road Traffic Amendment Bill before the House, let me first of all remind the country that back in February of last year, the Honourable Attorney General and member for St. Joseph would have introduced the Barbados Identity Management Bill into the House, now an act, and would have indicated then to Barbadians that they would soon be the holders of a chip-based national identification card. Indeed, the introduction of this card would have seen the phase out of the laminated printed ID, which is often susceptible to damage. And I was indicating to my colleague earlier, I have a copy of mine, Mr. Speaker. Well, not a copy, I have the original here. I'm not ashamed because it has a very lovely picture of me at the age of 18. So it brings back good memories. But the condition is not the greatest. I'm really not, especially if traveling, I really don't like to have to show it. And so I volunteered at Cabinet with the former minister back then.
You do not wish to make that a document?
No, sir. Let me place it back in my wallet. I did volunteer to the then minister when we were in Cabinet, having shown her my ID card at the time, that I felt that I could be one of the first guinea pigs to certainly be part of that transition to see how it was working. So I will say to the current minister that I will renew my call to be one of those first guinea pigs, along with some of my other Cabinet colleagues, that will put to the test the Barbados Identification Card, the new Barbados Identification Card. The technology which is being used in the ID card would result in persons having a single ID card, which, for the purposes of this debate, would have obviously included your driver's license. For those who want to have medical information included, they have the ability to include that. And also, of course, the issue of fingerprinting. We've indicated that it's not mandatory, but persons can opt in if they wish the fingerprints to be taken. So the card basically, because of the type of technology that is being introduced, obviously is in line with all of the other well-developed countries where these systems operate, where people don't have the plastic cards like I do, and many of the general public, but they move to a situation where they have a better card, a stronger card, certainly, to be able to produce when needed for identification. My understanding from the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, and certainly for the current member, who is now the minister who is member for St. Michael North, but also the current minister, was that the ID card is at an advanced stage. I think by all reports, it should probably be ready by the 1st of April. And so the purpose of this particular amendment, as I'm now the minister responsible for transport, is that this amendment bill will provide the new identification card to be used as a proxy for the driver's license. Now, I'll take you through, Mr. Speaker, each of the provisions of the Act, starting with Section 74(1). Relatively straightforward. It sets out the requirements that a driver carry his driver's license or an identification card when operating a motor vehicle on a public road, and produce the said identification upon request by a police officer or transport inspector who's in uniform. This requirement is therefore to allow the police or the transport inspector to ascertain the name and the address of the holder of the driver's license, the identity of the motor vehicle, and whether the driver of the motor vehicle is licensed to drive the particular class of vehicle. Section 74.2 sets out the steps to be taken by the driver of a motor vehicle on a public road who fails to produce on request by either the police officer or transport inspector his driver's license or his ID card. The driver must produce either his driver's license or ID card to the police station designated by the police officer or transport inspector within 24 hours of the request. And Mr. Speaker, I think these are general provisions. People know if you're stopped by the police, they simply ask you to produce a driver's license, or in this case, when we finally have all of the driver's license on the ID card, that you can then produce that as evidence that you have your driver's license in place as well. Section 74.3 sets out the offenses for contravening either of the aforementioned sections, and the person would be liable on summary conviction to a fine of $1,000 or a term of imprisonment of 12 months or both. Section 74.4 defines the reference to ID card or identification card as referring to an identification card issued under the former Act, which is the Barbados Identity Management Act of 2021. The Section 74.3 speaks to consequential changes to the Barbados Identity Management Act 2021, as column 1 of the schedule is now replaced by column 2 in the schedule. And the final change is at Section 74.4, which provides that the amendments as they relate to Section 2 and 3 will come into force on a date to be fixed for a proclamation. So essentially, Mr. Speaker, we are simply today just making this amendment to be able to bring the road traffic legislation in place with what is about to be a very ambitious rollout of the Barbados ID card, the new Barbados ID card. I believe it's fair to say that we're trying to line up all ducks in a row and to make sure that we are able to have a fairly smooth rollout of that when the time arises. I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. Michael North will probably speak more to that during the course of this debate. But I could not come this morning, Mr. Speaker, without speaking briefly, and I don't intend to deviate too far, particularly because we are going to be debating the estimates of revenue and expenditure just later this week and into next week. And one of the heads that will be brought with will be the Ministry of Public Works and Transport. And I therefore want at that time to go into more details in terms of the licensing office and issues related to our licenses and the electronic vehicle registration system. However, for the purposes of today, I want to address the concern that has been expressed by members of the general public. Indeed, we've had very heated sessions in the Cabinet of Barbados and certainly at Parliamentary Group from several members who have expressed on behalf of their constituents concerns regarding the backlog at the licensing authority in relation to the delivery of licenses to persons who would have paid their money and certainly are awaiting these licenses to be handed over. You may recall, Mr. Speaker, that several months ago, the former minister and member for St. Michael West Central would have indicated the challenges at the licensing authority which have been encountered as it tried to acquire the requisite plastic on which to print the driver's licenses. So we had that initial issue. The Honourable then Minister was able to very expeditiously try to obtain the licenses. I think everybody knows all the issues of COVID and all of the issues of supply. And we found ourselves, I guess, in a similar situation as all other countries across the world. The then Minister would have acted to put a number of systems in place in order to have additional staff coming in to support the existing staff to be able to get those, the backlog of the ID cards, of the driver licenses, to the general public. But regrettably, we still have a number of licenses that are still in the possession of the licensing authority. We, despite having utilized the services of the General Post Office to assist us in delivering licenses to actual homes so that we could deliver directly to persons for people who paid online, we ran into a situation where in some cases we had incorrect addresses, or the persons were not able to find the individuals at the time. And so we still do have a number of those licenses which would have been in the possession of the General Post Office, which are still to be delivered. So of about the 15,769 driving licenses sent to the General Post Office, we have to date been able to deliver 9,640, leaving a total of 5,221 still to be delivered. Of that number, we have about 908 that were returned to the Barbados Licensing Authority because those persons could not be found at the address, or in some cases they had given, as I said before, the incorrect address. And so we have a situation where we are working with the General Post Office. We're in the process of trying to find an additional service provider that can basically supplement what is happening within the licensing authority if we are to get these licenses into the hands of the general public. And certainly the permanent secretary and the officers in the ministry are working to try still to expedite this process, which obviously is creating a lot of backlog and a lot of discontent for a number of Barbadians. There has been a system put in place for those persons who are traveling, where those persons can come to the office. They can basically receive correspondence from the licensing authority. And while that is in no way, from where I stand, certainly satisfactory, because I travel myself and I cannot imagine that this can be a long-term solution, I just want to assure the public that we are working expeditiously to try to ensure that we bring a resolution to this situation and avoid this incident happening again. It also requires, Mr. Speaker, I think a deeper look at the structure of the licensing authority. There are a number of positions that have not been filled that have also impacted on the ability of the staff to be able to properly execute. We have a lot of good staff, but we also have some challenges in terms of structurally trying to get these things done. And so in the interim, we may have to now outsource certain services to be able to have the driver's licenses scanned and be able to have a system of distributing them to the general public as well. Now, the good news is that there is already in motion plans for the modernization of the licensing authority. We started, I believe it was in 2020, with a process for ensuring that persons could pay for the renewal of their license online. We're continuing to work with the MIST in order to work together to try to do more in terms of enabling persons to do more activities related to license authority online. So basically you can look to having persons who are over 70 also being able to use the online platform in order to be able to pay for their licenses, to allow persons to pay for the regulation tests. I think the system now is going to be such where you start to have appointment systems rather than persons constantly being disappointed when they have to stand up in a line in order to be able to go back in to pay for services, even to allow you to pay for the driving permit, the driving test, and of course the driving license. So we're moving very swiftly to reform the authority and to bring it into the 21st century with the help of MIST, and certainly to be able to transition onto the Easy Pay platform. It is hoped that these new systems should be ready sometime in March. I would like to say in terms of the testing, probably in mid-March, with a full rollout by April. And obviously with the backlog as we have right now, obviously we will try to, as we modernize, try to make sure that we're able to catch up, make sure that we have the necessary cards in place, and that we are in a position to be able to address a number of the outstanding concerns that citizens across this country may have. I have heard the cries. We've been talking about the electronic vehicle registration system. That is moving along very swiftly. That should also shortly be rolled out. When people talk about what is coming, oftentimes the criticism is, but you haven't fixed the licenses yet. And so I too am one that is always saying to the staff, but we didn't fix the licenses yet. We got to fix the licenses before we start talking big and bold about all the other things that are coming. Because if we don't solve the basic problems for people, there's no amount of telling people that you're modernizing that is going to make any difference to Barbadians. And so that commitment I give you, that we are working on the element of the driver's licenses, but we can't stand still either. And so that modernization process must continue to take place while at the same time moving in the direction of having the electronic vehicle registration system. Now, the good news is that we are actually at the stage where I think it's about 85% of the gantries have been installed across the country. We are obviously having to connect electricity to a number of these systems, and the training will shortly start for the staff within the licensing authority. There are a number of individuals as well who will have the opportunity to participate in working in the program. And so over the course of the next few weeks and months, we intend that we're in a position to be able to roll out the electronic registration, vehicle registration system. So, Mr. Speaker, a lot is happening in the licensing authority. As I said, I can't give certainty at this point in relation to timelines. I know that we're working with all of the partners to be able to get the driver's licenses into the hands of the general public. Persons can listen out for the notifications as to when to collect, because as we are able to scan and prepare the licenses, the intention is to communicate with those persons who have been waiting so that they can have appointed days and times where they can come to the various post offices. And also we've investigated as well, looking at the schools as well as a possibility in respective parishes to be able to do those deliveries. So again, I regret the inconvenience that has been caused to a number of Barbadians, but just to give the assurance to the public that the issue is being dealt with, and that we hope to be able to wrestle this to the ground within the course of the next few days. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, we will address a number of the other issues in relation to the ministry in the upcoming estimates, but I therefore want to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill. I remember. Be read a second time. Honourable member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and lend my voice to speak on the bill before the House, which in its presentation is an amendment to the Road Traffic Act. But, Mr. Speaker, before I proceed with my few and brief comments this morning, it would be remiss of me if I did not signal that as my first speech in this honorable House, I want to thank the many people who have participated in and contributed to the fact that I am here standing in this honorable House of Assembly today. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I must give thanks to God for giving me strength, giving me knowledge and wisdom, insight, all that he has given me that has afforded me this privilege and this opportunity. I want to thank, of course, my family for their unwavering support over these many years, their guidance, words of advice, and for their love, for their patience, and for all that they have provided me with in this journey. Of course, we're still fresh on the heels of a campaign and an election, so I want to thank my campaign management team that would have contributed to me being able to succeed at the polls and now to stand in this honorable House. Of course, I extend appreciation to our political leader, our General Secretary, all of the BLP family that would have supported my journey and would have continued and continue to support me even as I stand here today. But last and certainly not least, I want to give a special, deep, and from my heart appreciation and thank you to the people of St. Michael North, my people in St. Michael North, the good people of St. Michael North. Indeed, sir, on January 19th, they went out in their numbers and they would have demonstrated a level of support for me and love for me. And I commit to them today, Mr. Speaker, through you, that I will honor the confidence, the respect that they have reposed in me. And I will do my level best, all that is within my strength, within my power, to represent them from the heart and to give them my very best in this house. Mr. Speaker, this is an honor that I do not take lightly. I'm actually humbled by it because my journey to this house has not been typical. It has not been your usual journey. I remember growing up in the very same St. Michael North at 2G Nursery Lane, Eden Law, St. Michael. And I often tell persons that whilst I grew up in an environment where it can be easily characterized as being of poor and humble beginnings, my mother would not have allowed us to think of ourselves as anything less than. She would not allow us to perceive of ourselves of lacking. She would have instilled in us significant qualities and principles that I believe have, and I give credit to, have allowed me to become the person that I am today and have allowed me to be able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished thus far in this journey called life. She was effective, Mr. Speaker, in teaching us how to share, in teaching us the principles of hard work and dedication and commitment to task. She taught us, Mr. Speaker, the principles of looking out for others, and of course, how to give of our best in everything that we have to do. And through adopting these principles, Mr. Speaker, through the demonstration of hard work, and ultimately through service to others, I believe they have all worked together. They have come together to allow me, Mr. Speaker, to stand before you and to serve today the constituents of St. Michael North, and ultimately to continue and to bear the various roles that have now been entrusted to me. Mr. Speaker, whilst January 19th represents a very important day, not only for myself, but also for all of my colleagues in this house, it serves as a confirmation of the commitment to serve that I have demonstrated to the people of St. Michael North over many, many years. And through you, sir, today I reaffirm that commitment and that dedication to them, and I want them to know that I have their back, not only now, but for a long, long time to come. With their support, of course, Mr. Speaker. If you would indulge me, sir, it would also be remiss of me if I did not give honor to the distinguished gentleman who immediately preceded me in this honorable house, representing the constituency of St. Michael North. And Mr. Speaker, whilst I did not seek your prior approval, I believe that you would permit me to use his name because I will be doing it in a complimentary fashion. Mr. Ronald Topping. Sir, as you would know, Mr. Topping served with distinction in the capacity of Member of Parliament for St. Michael North for 27 years. 27 unbroken years. Sir, he gave much of his life to this constituency. And I would say, and I'm sure that my parliamentary colleagues would agree, that he did so and did so very well. So I would want to, as I stand here today, to take this opportunity to salute him and to also that is before the House this morning. And I see it as a part of the legislative process that is really concerned with this idea of facilitation, business facilitation, the facilitation of our citizens and their access to e-services and their access not only to e-services but access to their government. And in this particular case, being able to assure any authorities of their identity. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we are working towards a technologically advanced and mature Barbados. A mature Barbados where our citizens will be able to have access to some of the latest and the most connected and useful pieces of technology, even in the form of their very ID card and their very driver's license that they carry in their wallets and their purses. So, Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm obliged.
Honourable member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this afternoon with extreme pride and humility to give what is in effect my first speech in this august chamber. I too want to start by thanking the good people of St. Andrew who would have given me this great honor of representing them here in this place, and who would have reposed their trust and their confidence in me, and for whom I pledge that I will represent to the best of my ability. The communities across St. Andrew, Mr. Speaker, just like many across Barbados, are built on expressions of love and care and a passion for our environment. We've worked together as a people. We've supported each other as a people. And because of that kind of experience, that kind of bond amongst us, I can stand here this afternoon and say to all the constituents of St. Andrew, those who would have supported me, those who would have voted for me, and those who voted against me, that I, as long as I have breath in my body, and as long as you will have me, I will continue to fight for the betterment, for the improvement of the lives of all the people of the constituency of St. Andrew. And I want to include, just to break it down, the ones in St. Thomas, the parts of St. Joseph, the parts of St. Peter, and the parts of St. James that consist the constituency of St. Andrew, all of St. Andrew, including those that I share with my friend and neighbor to the east in St. Joseph. It would be remiss of me to not mention my mentor, the former member of St. Andrew, member of Parliament for St. Andrew, who saw some leadership potential in me so many years ago, and who would have groomed me and trained me and brought me to this point in my life where I can stand here now in this position. He was very instrumental in all of that. I want to thank him publicly. I've done it many times before, but I want the record to show that I thank him here in this place for all that he has done for me and all that he has done for the good people of St. Andrew. And I know that his shoes will be some big shoes to fill. I know. But as I said before, will do my very best to be just as good a representative for the people of St. Andrew as our beloved George Payne was for over 30 years. I also want to thank the Prime Minister for showing confidence in me. I guess I want to thank the Deputy Prime Minister as well for bringing me along with her. Must be some good reason why she thought to continue to work with me, even in our new capacity as in the Ministry of Public Works. I couldn't want a better partner. I assure I'm very, very happy and very honored and very humble that you would choose to continue with me. It means a lot to me, and I thank you. Mr. Speaker, I want to add my voice to the debate on this bill, the amendment to this Road Traffic Act, CAT 295. That was mentioned before, is a very simple amendment. In fact, the main difference is that, as was alluded to before, the authorities will now have the power to request, and most importantly, persons can use the IDs that was issued under the Barbados Identity Management Act 2021. They can use that as a proxy or in place of their driver's license. And this, it does two things I can think about right now. Other than being a convenience for those in the driving public, I think it also allows for authorities, whether it be police or officials from the Ministry of NTW, traffic inspectors, to do their jobs more easily, because they can more easily verify information. I would not be surprised if they can verify that information on the spot when asking persons to produce their driver's license. So in essence, it not only makes the work of the authorities easier, but it also forms an important part of that transformative agenda that we have alluded to here today and we've been talking about as a government during this particular administration and in the previous administration, where we are looking to make governance in this country smarter, where we are looking to make conducting of business in this country, both in the private and public sector, easier. I think this introduction of this national ID, this digital ID, is a step in the right direction, as it says that Barbados is adapting to the 21st century, that we're evolving as a modern nation. And I remember, just like the member for St. Michael North, my experiences with the old license. I'm not even going to go as far back as the red one. I can use the one that we currently use. I traveled to overseas some time ago. I was visiting another house of Parliament, and the entrance, they ask for your driver's license or your ID. Now, I didn't even bother to take out my Barbados ID. I felt that would have been a waste of time. It might have been embarrassing. But I reached for my driver's license. And the young lady took it from me very politely. She smirked, and she gave me it back. She said, I think you should probably get your passport. But everyone in that line was a tourist just like me, and I saw that they took the identification cards, they either tapped it or swiped it, and they were allowed through because they had modern identification cards. And I'm pleased that Barbados now is now poised to be going in that direction, where we are modernizing that. I mean, I know that the old driver's license was a source of embarrassment for many of Barbadians traveling overseas just years ago, and many were happy, extremely happy to see the back of that old thing. And many would be very happy to see the back of the old, outdated, laminated ID card as well. But, Mr. Speaker, all of these new and fancy innovations will mean very little for those of us who live in rural spaces, who are still grappling with a terrible and desperately diminished road network. And I would not miss this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to speak briefly about the conditions of the roads in the rural parts of Barbados. As the member for St. Michael Southeast alluded to, these things mean nothing to the average man. These fancy new things, this technology, means nothing to the average man. If the vehicle that you're driving, you have to spend thousands of dollars repairing because the roads are no good. Because the roads are full of potholes still, or they're wavy and bumpy. These things means nothing. It's just talk. But I'm happy that just last week, Mr. Speaker, our Prime Minister, she would have signed a framework agreement paving the way for approval of a loan from the Export-Import Bank of China, which would fund the rehabilitation of 224 roads in the kilometers of road in the Scotland district, or 56 roads to be more specific, to the tune of 230 million Barbados dollars. And that's where I want to turn my attention to, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister signed that, at the signing ceremony, when she was signing that agreement, she made mention of the Scotland district. She made mention of the East Coast. I think at some point she said something along the lines that that part of Barbados, it is that pride of place that most people are proud of because it represents perhaps the most beautiful example of what this country has to offer in terms of pristine beauty. I'm paraphrasing. But she said words to that effect. And she did not specify the part of the Scotland district that she was referring to, but those of us who heard and those of us who knew that she was referring to St. Andrew. She said the East Coast. She was being fair to our colleagues in St. Joseph and St. Thomas and St. John. I know she was. That's the type of person that she is. But I know that she was referring to the beautiful parish of St. Andrew. So but I'm glad, I'm happy regardless that us in the rural parts of Barbados, in the rural spaces, are seeing that type of interest being paid to our concerns. And I'm glad that this government is paying attention and working assiduously to address some of the issues that are peculiar to rural spaces. I mean, I'm talking not only about issues as it relates to roads, because as a member for St. Michael Southeast and a member for St. Lucie and a member for St. Peter, can tell you that in the north of the country we have concerns that are alien to people living in other parts of Barbados. I mean, as it relates, these are concerns as it relates to water availability and water quality issues. Things that even me that live in the north, but yet in the central part of the country, never knew about. Never saw before in real life. But these are some of the concerns that impact the lives of people in the northern parts of this country. And I'm glad that this government is working hard to ensure that not only the issues as it relates to the roads, which is very important, but those other issues that speaks to the health and in some cases the dignity of the good people in the rural parts of this country are addressed and being addressed as a matter of urgency. They want to commend the new Minister of Transport and Works and Water Resources for the way that she has taken the bull by the horn, so to speak. She has not sat down and depended on reports, but she has gotten out there every week, hit the road, meeting people, talking to real people, engaging people, explaining to people. I've done it too. We've both done it. But I give credit to her. And ensuring people that we, as a ministry, we as a government, we do all in our power to ensure that their inconveniences, that their issues are dealt with. And that the focus going forward, at least certainly for the next few years, will be on addressing their problems, treating their problems, and in seeing that they enjoy the type of standard of living and that those of us in other parts of Barbados take for granted as it relates to our road networks and our water. Also, those persons in St. Andrew, places like St. Simon's, White Hill, Rock Hall, Mosebottom, Greg's Farm, I'm sure that these people are happy knowing that soon their concerns of their houses slipping into the gully or their roads being destroyed or slipping away, being damaged by corrosion, will soon be a thing of the past because of the efforts being made by this government and because of that agreement that was recently signed with the XM Bank to fix all those roads, to rehabilitate all those roads that have been problematic for so many years in that part of Barbados. And I have every confidence that it will happen because it has already started. But it started in St. John. I see evidence of roads being done in Todd's Land, in Sherburne, and that's in the rural spaces. Then there's Fairfield and in Flagstaff. We've seen the Highway 2A, parts of Highway 2A being fixed. We've seen parts of Highway 1. All those roads have been fixed. So I know that the work has started, and I know that it will continue. And I'm thankful. So I just want to take this opportunity to assure my people, my people in St. Andrew, they're concerned. Yes, they'll be happy, just like any one of us, to have that new fancy Barbados ID / Barbados driver's license / what the other elements that can be bolted onto it. But I know what they want more than anything else. It's good road. I know the people in North want good, clean water coming from their taps. And I assure you that these things will come. I just felt I had to say those things. They were important. But just to get back to the bill being debated this afternoon, all I can say is that this government has always been a responsive government, and this bill is just part of that effort to create more robust systems that will allow not only for an ease of doing business within the public sector, but also within the private space as well, within the private sector. And those ordinary Barbadians, I think ultimately will be the beneficiaries of not only this particular amendment, not only this particular piece of technology, but the whole suite of technologies and things that are going to be rolled out in time because of this innovative ministry that we have put together that was ably led by the member for St. Philip West, and is now being equally so led by the equally competent member for St. Michael North. So I want to, as I close, associate myself with the words of my colleagues in supporting this particular amendment. Mr. Speaker, this is only just part of what we can expect and what the good people of Barbados can expect. And with those few words, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would have to say that my heart is filled with joy listening to the presentations of both honourable members, member for St. Michael North and also the member for St. Andrew, giving their maiden speeches and speaking certainly on this particular bill. I'm particularly pleased because the member for St. Michael North has demonstrated a very sound understanding of the area already, is batting as though he has been in that position for such a long time. I know he also has some big shoes to fill, but I think that he has done so exceptionally this morning, and and to his credit, and also the honourable member for St. Andrew as well, who I am exceptionally proud of because he has been in my shadow in the Ministry of Education. Sometimes you don't realize what people have in them until they have that space and that opportunity to shine. And I feel as though a lot of our younger members are now getting that opportunity and that space to be able to be themselves and to grow into their own. For me, I feel very good because I know what that feeling is like when you finally reach the House of Parliament and you are here in your own right, representing your constituents, and you have that opportunity to be able to speak on behalf of the people who have vested the responsibility in you to speak on their behalf. And so I want to thank both honourable members, and I look forward to the contributions not only of yourselves but also of all young honourable members as well in the future. Let me just say that the key here, Mr. Speaker, is that while we acknowledge that there are issues still to be resolved, you heard the honourable member for St. Andrews speak to the issue of roads, The Honourable Member for St. Michael North speak to all of the areas and the aspects in relation to the transformational agenda that still need to be addressed. This government cannot sit on its laurels and do nothing. And therefore, while we are actively trying to address the problems, we also still have to plan for the future. And so I know when this Barbados ID card was even first talked about, there was a lot of concern. Why are we focusing on this now? We're in the middle of a pandemic, you know, why are we going there? And we didn't back down as a government. We said, no, this is what we want to do. Whenever we come out of the ashes of the COVID pandemic, we must be in a position to do what the people of this country vested us with the power to do, which is to transform Barbados in as wholesome a way as possible. And so, Mr. Speaker, I therefore again want to pledge that we are working assiduously in relation to the licensing office to ensure that we are able to deal with the backlog of the driver's licenses and to assure the general public that we understand the concerns that have been expressed. And as the member for St. Andrew has indicated, we are, both of us are out there listening to the concerns as we did in education to be able to get to the root of the problem. Because no amount of technology, no amount of transformation that we intend to do is going to mean anything unless we fix the small issues. So whether it is water or whether it is roads, we have a responsibility to fix the niggling issues in our Barbadian society so that Barbadians feel as though they are benefiting from the programs and the policies that we are in the process of implementing. So yes, we will do the multi-million-dollar roads, but we're gonna make sure that we also ensure that the community roads are done. And equally, we've got to make sure that we move towards an electronic registration system, but we also have to make sure that we get the basic things like the ID cards into the hands of Barbadians as well in a timely manner also. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I therefore beg to move that Your Honor do, beg to move the second reading. That's sorry, that the bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
Clause 1.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 do not stand part.
Question is that clause 1 stands part. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clause 2 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clause 3 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stands part. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those members against, please say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clause 4 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 4 stands part. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those members against, please say no. Think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those members against, please say no. Think the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2022.
The question is that the bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, with that, we have come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Wednesday, the 23rd of February at 10 a.m., at which time we will begin the committee in relation to the estimates of revenue and expenditure, which will continue into Thursday and Friday and into the following week as well.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until Wednesday, the 23rd of February at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Wednesday, the 23rd day of February 2022 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.